our next virtual lesson here at Little Bit. So today's virtual lesson is going to be a little bit different. So we will be starting with a short presentation, but it's going to be a lot shorter than it is in a lot of the lessons that we do. So we're going to be doing parts of the horse. So a short presentation talking about what the parts of the horse are called. And then we're going to unmute you all so that we can play a game. We're going to have a pony come in and we're going to play a quiz where we point to a part of the horse and you guys have to try and remember from what we told you earlier today about what that part of the horse is called. Okay, so it's going to be a bit more interactive today. But I'm going to step a little back. I'm going to take my mask off so you guys can hear me really clearly. And we are going to talk about the parts of the horse. Okay, so we have this really beautiful picture that if any of you had our intern instructor Kimberly in your lessons, she very kindly made this beautiful picture of a horse for us. So we might be using this in our lessons when you guys come back. It's really fun because we can pull the parts off and you guys have to take it, find out where it goes and stick it back on. So a really great resource for our lessons here. Okay, so we are going to start right at the top. So there's some parts of the horse that are not on here that you guys might know. So let's start right at the top with our horse's ears. So the part in between the horse's ears, so if you were sitting on your horse, you would be able to see right in between the horse's ears, that is called the poll. P-O-L-L. So sometimes your instructor might say, we might do some exercises and we might say, try and reach the horse's ears, try and reach your horse's poll. So that's a good word to remember. That's the bit right in between the horse's ears. On the horse's face, the front of their face at the top here is the same as ours. That is their forehead. But I actually think the funner word to learn is what this super cool bit of mane here, the horse's bangs. What's that bit called? That is called the forelock. So the forelock sits over the forehead. And some of our horses at Little Bit, Mr. Aussie, when you guys get to meet him, he has the best forelock. It's huge. It goes all over his face. It's very impressive. Okay. So our poll right in between the ears and the forelock on their forehead. Let's go ahead and start moving down the horse's neck. Okay, so underneath the mane at the top of the horse's neck, there's kind of a really thick muscly bit. And when you get back and you get on your horses, you'll be able to feel it, and we'll show you it on the horse that's going to come in and work with us today. And that is called the crest. So like the crest of a wave, like that arch shape that you get, that is called the crest of the horse's neck. And I'm sure many of you know that the hair that comes out of the crest is called the mane. So we have the mane and the forelock. That's the horse's hair. The mane can be really useful. Horses don't have feeling in their mane like we do. So sometimes we'll say, hold on to a little bit of mane. That can be a really useful thing to help keep your hands down. If you want to keep your hands down and forward, we can hold a little bit of mane. And you will notice that if you do that, your horse doesn't care at all. They won't even respond. They'll just keep going. Unlike us, obviously, if someone grabbed your hair, you would definitely tell them that that's not okay. But our horses are totally fine with that. Okay, so we have our crest and our mane. So the next bit down here, if you're riding in one of my classes, we quite often learn this name. This one is called the withers. And that is the bony bit of the horse that's right in front of the saddle. So your saddle sits here. This is where you're sitting. And there's kind of a bony bit right here. And that's called the horse's withers. And if you remember, if you were in the lesson where we talked about how we describe our horse, like what color is our horse, what breed is our horse, how tall is our horse. Then the withers is where we measure the height of our horse. So we don't measure the horse's height to up here. We measure it to the withers, which is the highest point on the horse's back. So really good one to remember, the withers. Sometimes when we're learning to 2-point, we might want to put our hands on the withers to give ourselves some support. So if your instructor says, let's put our hands on the withers, this bony bit right here in front of the saddle. Okay, so moving along the horse's back, we have the saddle bit, the bit that's kind of lower in the middle, and that's just called the horse's back. If we were to get really advanced with our horse anatomy and we started looking at the horse's skeleton, then the back is divided up into different sections of the spine. And if we were to be doing a much more advanced lesson, we would go into that. So that's something that if you were interested in, you could look that up online, or you could ask your instructor about that when you got back. We've talked a lot about the health of the horse, and for a riding horse, it's really important that we take really good care of our horse's back, because we want their muscles to be nice and strong and balanced to be able to carry us as riders to help our horse be comfortable. Okay, so we started at the poll, we moved down through the crest, over the withers to the horse's back where we sit as riders. This hump at the back, if you were sitting on your horse and you put your hands behind you to the humpy bit of their butt at the back, that is called the croup. It is higher up than the part that you sit on. Should be, anyways. So yeah, this is the round part of the horse's back. That's called their croup. And from there, their back keeps going into their tail. So if you have ever groomed a horse, you can feel at the top of their tail, there's like a fleshy, bony part. And it stops normally about here, and then all the hair from the tail, kind of, that's where it's all attached to. And that bony, fleshy part at the top is called the dock. That's the bony part in the top of the tail. Okay, so going from our horse's ears all the way to the tail, we started with the poll, came down through the crest, over the withers, through the horse's back, up over their croup, and finally out to their dock in the tail. So that's the structure of the top of our horse over to their tail. Okay, we'll mention a few other key names for kind of the main part of the horse's body, and then we're going to talk about the horse's legs. Horse's legs are very complicated structures, so there's a lot of words to learn there. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the main parts of the body. So when you're on your horse, if you watched the lesson about our posting diagonal, we talked about looking down and seeing the horse's leg moving backwards and forwards. And this part of the leg that's kind of just in front of you as you're riding, you'll be able to see it moving backwards and forwards. And this is the horse's shoulder. So just like mine here, if this was my leg, if I was a horse and I walked on all fours, when I moved this leg, this shoulder would move backwards and forwards. So the horse's shoulder is all the way up here in their body. Okay, then we have the front of the horse. So that's the horse's chest, just like it is on us as humans. And then the bit where your leg goes, our leg hangs down the side of what we call the horse's barrel. So if you ever want to do some exercises to test your balance, sometimes you can practice sitting over a barrel, like we have some big, huge water barrels here at Little Bit. I had an instructor once who had us do an exercise where we would put a saddle over a barrel, but we wouldn't fasten it with a girth, and you had to get on and off the saddle, balancing that saddle on the barrel. And the idea is that you learn to keep your balance centered over the horse's barrel, so we're not tipping from one side to another. So the big round bit of the horse is called the horse's barrel. Okay, so we're going to move on to the structures in the legs. Now, horses' legs are super important because they're big, strong animals, right? So they have all of this weight up here, their barrel, their neck, all of this strength in the muscling here, and that all stands on those 4 legs. So their legs it's very important that we look after their legs, and to do that, we have to understand what all these different parts are. So, as we look at the legs, generally, the horse has big, strong, bony parts down the front of the legs and kind of lots of what we call soft tissue. So that's kind of pieces of muscle, things that we call ligaments and tendons that hold all the parts of the horse together. So, starting at the top, we have this big fleshy bit up here. It's a big strong muscle called the forearm. So that's a really big strong muscle at the top of the horse's leg. As we move down, we have our horse's knees. So you'll all have seen that when we've done our lessons about cleaning horses' feet and hoof care. We can see that when a horse picks its foot up off the ground, it bends its knee so that we can pick the foot up. We then move down into this area. So, horse has 4 legs, and this part is actually the same on all of them. It's the same on the front legs and the same on the back legs. There is a big bone which runs down the front here, and that is called the cannon bone. We've labeled it here because there's a lot to talk about, but the cannon bone runs down the front of each of the horse's 4 legs. It's the same on all of them. It's a really big, strong bone. As we move down past the cannon bone, we get to the joint. It's like a ball joint. So you'll feel it as you run your hands. So you have the knee is kind of like a ball, and then a long straight line for the cannon bone. And then the next ball is called the fetlock joint. And again, when we're picking horses' feet out, that's a part that bends so that we can pick up that horse's foot and clean out their feet. That's also the same on all 4 legs. So fetlock joint, this joint here, and that is the same here on the back legs as well. As we move down from the fetlock, we have what we call the pastern. It's a funny word, right? The pastern. So fetlock into the pastern. And this is another bone which sits in here as a part of the horse's skeletal structure in the leg. And the last part before we go into the hoof is called the coronet. So we talked about that a little bit in the hoof care and maybe the farrier lesson as well about the coronet band. That's where the hoof starts from, and the hoof grows down out of the coronet band. So the coronet band is the last part of the horse's leg before we start the hoof structure. Okay, so that is our horse's foreleg. So as we said, many things are the same in their back legs. We talked about the cannon bone, and we talked about the fetlock. But we can see here that the shape of the horse's back leg is very different to the shape of the horse's front leg. And one of the key differences is the shape of the middle joint, the joint that bends. So on the front leg, we have the knee. That's like a big ball that we said. That's the one that moves as we pick up the horse's hoof. And we're going to see it when we start working with Mr. Ronan, who's just coming in to join us here. Hi, friend. You get to be our pony for the day. Okay, so we can see the front leg has this big knee joint. The back leg looks very different to that. It goes out to this point at the back. The joint's kind of the other way round, right? This leg is going to bend by this bit coming up in front here. This leg bends by this bit going back there. Okay, so the joint is bending in opposite directions. This joint here is called the hock. H-O-C-K. The hock. So you'll hear people talk about, we want to see the horse being able to bend through its hocks. That's a good sign when a horse is able to move its joints nice and freely. And the other important joint that we have at the back of the horse, which is different to the front, is it's actually very hard to see because it's inside, but right at the top of the horse's leg up here, and we'll actually be able to see it a little bit better on Ronan, is called the stifle. This is a really important joint and part of the horse. It's actually quite complicated, has lots of different pockets in it, but this is what allows the horse to lift. It's kind of like your hip joint. What allows the horse, if you think this is like the horse's hock, or like bends the wrong way, the hip is what allows the horse to lift their whole leg up and down, and the hock is the bit that enables the bottom bit to kind of move like that, if that makes sense. If you think about when we did our gaits of the horse lesson, we could see that leg like swinging underneath. That's helped by your stifle. Okay, so we talked about lots and lots of different words there. So I know that is, and they're all really funny sounding, right? We have this thing with horse anatomy where they're all, it's not like front legs and back legs. We have all these special names for everything. So there's a lot of new words to learn there. And it's way better for you to play a game with a pony than it is to listen to me talking all the time. So let's go ahead and go and spend some time with Mr. Ronan, and let's see if we can all learn together some of these names of parts of the horse, okay? All right, should we come around, Devin? Yeah. Okay.